Everyone has a bucket list. I do. Maybe it's roller coaster, maybe it's skydiving.
Have you ever thought about taking a small airplane ride?
In this episode, we're going to try to convince you why this should be on everyone's bucket list.
And if you're one of those people who'll say, I'll never get into one of these things, we hope to convince you otherwise.
We're going to take you through how you can do it, where you can do it, and where this can develop into.
Join us on this episode of Aviation Intrigue, where we'll tell you how to get an airplane ride, a balloon ride, a helicopter ride. Stay tuned.
This is aviation intrigue.
So, Elaine, speaking of plane rides, I think that people fall under two categories: people who think small airplanes are boring, or people who are afraid and don't want to get into it. What is involved in an airplane ride?
An airplane ride or any kind of aircraft ride can be anything you want it to be. And that's why I think everybody should try something that appeals to them. These rides can be anything from a short 10 to 15 minute circle around your hometown at your local airport. There are summer events all over the place that offer these for a very reasonable cost. And you can go all the way up to thrill-seeking rides in other countries where you take helicopters into glaciers through the Grand Canyon, other scenic places, and that is the whole range of aircraft rides, everything in between. So I bet there's something out there for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to me, it seems like the most common reason and the most compelling reason, if I could, is to do a sightseeing. And that could be sightseeing of your own local neighborhood, or maybe you are in a landmark place and you want to take a sightseeing tour of the Niagara Falls or Mount Rushmore, Grand Canyon, whatever. To me, that is the most compelling reason. If you're there, get in a small airplane, get in a helicopter, go for a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned all over the country there are national landmarks, and those are very, very likely to have places, little companies that offer airplane rides. You mentioned the Badlands. I know of a pilot who offer these in a 182 for the company, an aerial tour of the Badlands, and she's having a great time with it. And with this summer season coming up, I think she's going to be very busy. And if that doesn't interest you, there's the Grand Canyon. There are cityscapes. You can do these from coast to coast. And if you just live in a small town, look up your local airport. They can get you an airplane ride.
I know that the recent history has had some tragic events, but in New York City, doing city tours along the Hudson and around the Statue of Liberty, that's a big deal. So big cities are also possible for small airplane rides or helicopter rides.
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned New York City, and I know in the news recently we did have a terrible tragedy with a touring helicopter that crashed in the city during one of those rides. They do thousands and thousands of these from various companies. So I know that for the most part, they are very, very safe.
And I think we should mention that by doing this helicopter tours or airplane tours or even hot air balloon tours, you actually get to see the landscape from a completely different perspective. Something that you have to be in them to appreciate it. You can see pictures, you can see movies, you can see IMAX. There's nothing like actually seeing it for yourself.
I totally agree. When I first became a flight instructor, I worked full time at a school that offered gift certificates for local short scenic airplane rides. And people loved to just come in, buy a certificate for their family, for their friends, for their kids, for their birthdays. They were a great Mother's Day, Father's Day gift. You could come in, and if you lived close enough to the airport, we could fly you over your house. You could take pictures, and people just absolutely love that. And there would be an annual open house where we would have dozens and dozens, 80, 100 people signed up for that 15-minute ride around the city. And that was absolutely the most fun day for people because they could go up with some of their family or most of their family. I really love those because the smiles on people's faces when they are done with those rides was just incredibly rewarding for me. And I've always enjoyed those.
Didn't you tell me, Elaine, that you once flew a couple who actually proposed while in an airplane?
Yes, sometimes you get somebody who brings someone to the airport as a surprise. They drive into the airport, they show up, and they say, "Hi, I'm the one who booked an airplane ride for 2 o'clock." And I would say, "Okay, let's give them a safety briefing and let's go for it." And I remember one where the person I called ahead of time, and he said he was going to propose to his girlfriend, and can we keep it a secret until we literally got up in the air? And I said, okay, we'll keep it a secret. And they were just absolutely having a blast with it. And that was a short ride, but obviously probably the happiest days in their lives. And the fact that they wanted to do that, or at least one of them wanted to do that in a small airplane, and made it work out in the end to be an absolutely unique experience was really cool. I remember that to this day.
That's fantastic. I actually did almost exactly the same thing. And this guy, he's a friend, he's a brother of a friend of mine. And then he said, hey, I'm going to propose. My girlfriend does not know about this, so we got to keep it secret. So we got into a small airplane, and it was in the evening. This is in Wisconsin, and I flew towards the sunset. And just as
Oh
we
wow.
got near the sunset, and we had sort of prearranged this, I said, oh, let me try to fly this plane and let me show you something. And that gave him a chance to take his ring and, get on his knees. I think she was in the front seat. Oh, yeah. He tricked her into sitting in the front of the airplane, pretending that
Wow.
she was taking a flying lesson. So he was in the back seat. So he gave him a chance to get on his knees and get the ring out. And then I turned the plane sort of the sunset was on our back, so I was able to take my cell phone and take a picture of it. So this is him proposing to who became his fiance at that point with a sunset in the back in a small airplane. It was spectacular.
Oh wow. Yeah, that is absolutely unique. And the fact that you were able to plan that out and then snap a picture of it. This is definitely the time for people to take selfies, take pictures. As a pilot, I'm generally asked to do that at the beginning and during, if we're able to, and at the end. So you just have to take your cell phone and take as many pictures as you can. People are taking pictures of the scenery around. In the Midwest, fall colors is a really popular time to take scenic flights, because when you're seeing the peak and you're flying over the woodlands and people are taking pictures, taking videos. So you're not only seeing these incredible views of these amazing fall colors that you can see around, you are getting an airplane ride, and you're up in the air enjoying that, sharing that with people. And that's great. And that's something that got me into aviation. I was offered an airplane ride just out of the blue by somebody I didn't know too well, a friend of a friend. And as soon as I did that, 2 minutes later, I was just like, I'm going for it. I'm going to become a pilot.
Yeah, the other thing I'm thinking is that the small airplanes or helicopters sometimes are the only way to get to see certain places. For example, in Alaska or some wilderness, you're there, you have to fly on the small airplanes to get to see the places. If you are dependent on roads and stuff like that, and depending on the season, you may not even be able to get to certain places. So aviation and small aircraft becomes the way you see the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, this is one of the best places, or the best ways, rather, to get, say, a view of your farm or your house or a family member's home or ranch or estate or apartment building for that matter, and have people waving from the porch. Even though you could do this with drones, let's say, those are only limited to a few hundred feet off the ground. And in an airplane, you actually have to be 500 to 1,000 feet above the ground legally, depending on where you're flying. And so to get that bird's eye view of where you're living is really the way to go. That is probably the most common reason why people might want to take a special reserved airplane ride. And if you live close enough, they can only take about 30 minutes.
I also know people who do commercial photography from these small airplanes, and they take photos of new real estate development areas, or for advertising purposes of a factory or a housing complex, or even agriculture or survey purposes.
Yes, surveying, aerial photography, those are a lot of other uses for small 2 and 4 seat aircraft that are really common all around the country, depending on what your mission is. And you're literally taking a scenic flight to do a job, but it's very much the same way. You're flying a little slower than you normally would, flying cross country, going from point A to point B, and you're also flying a little bit lower than you would flying cross country. So a lot of these are other examples of local flights where you're using these small airplanes.
We keep talking about airplanes, but it doesn't have to be an airplane. It could be a helicopter.
Right.
It could be a hot air balloon. It could be gliders with no engines.
It could be gliders. We talked about gliders. You and I are glider pilots, and I know that our local glider port is getting ready for the flying season with what they call discovery flights. You can sign up, very very reasonable cost, and go take a glider ride.
Yeah, speaking of glider ride, I saw this on TV. There's a show on, I can't remember, something like Bigfoot or something like that. And they actually got in a glider, and I want to say somewhere in Missouri, and they took a glider looking for Bigfoot in the show. And
Wow.
their argument was that the glider did not make any engine noise, so they were able to go look for Bigfoot. Don't judge me, but I watch Bigfoot shows. But I'm also a glider pilot. But I thought it was pretty cool that you get in a glider and look for Bigfoot.
Oh, that's great. I think I might offer that to people who want to take a glider ride. Is that if you want to be really quiet, you can look for Bigfoot anywhere with the glider. And between that and you mentioned hot air balloons, those can be really popular if you can seek those out. And there are any number of places all around the world that you can do any of these experiences. So whether it's over your house or across the world on vacation, this is something that you have to do. Pick and choose how you want to do it and get it done.
Yeah, forget Mount Rushmore, forget Graceland. We're going to offer Bigfoot right.
We could definitely offer Bigfoot rides. I think I heard some rumors about Bigfoot lurking in the North Woods of Wisconsin. So that definitely be
There you go. I
something we
think we
should put
have a
on our
new
mission list.
business proposition here.
Bigfoot sightings by glider. I don't think anybody's done that.
Elaine, on the other side, like I said before, maybe some people are fearful of airplanes. Have you dealt with anybody? I cannot remember a single person that I've flown with which said, I'm never going to do this again. I've had it.
No, we'll talk a lot more about what to expect maybe if you're a newbie to aircraft rides, but we will talk you through about all the things you need to do to prepare and what the pilot's going to tell you. And if you're still nervous after that, let us know. But in terms of people who never enjoy these experiences, I've never ever had that happen. I've had some reluctant passengers going up for rides or people who are a little bit anxious, and we can definitely talk to them about it. Like, okay, if someone says I'm afraid of heights, definitely talk about it, and I'll say, I'm afraid of heights too, and here I am flying an airplane for a living. So if you kind of tell them that you're not alone and that you're right there with them, and they go through with the airplane ride, they come back so glad that they did it. I've never had anybody think otherwise. And so for those of you who are reluctant, I guarantee that if you talk to somebody about it, especially friends who have done it, they can tell you that it's worth it. Definitely worth it.
Completely the same experience I've had. I don't think anybody has said, I'm never going to do this. I've given rights to family, friends, people who book these kind of scenic rides around the neighborhood. I'm not flying around Grand Canyon or something. Although I did do a Grand Canyon tour with a friend of mine once, but that was on our way back
Wow.
from the West Coast. We'll talk about that more. But uh, I don't think even people who think they are fearful, when you go see the world from a completely different perspective, it changes the way you think about it. It's not the fear. The fear kind of disappears. You're awestruck, especially you mentioned fall foliage, right? Up in the north and in the fall foliage is that you forget you're in a high up. It's just spectacular.
Yes, absolutely. And when the day is smooth, so we'll talk about ways to ensure that you have good weather, smooth air, so you don't run into a lot of turbulence. You can get an absolutely silky smooth rides where you can't even tell that you're off the ground in an airplane. And it's amazing the sensations that you feel and don't feel, and all the different ways of making sure that you know what to expect. So it's one of those things that you can pick the option that's best for you. And if it's fall foliage that appeals to you, there's definitely ways to do that to make a really positive experience out of it.
So if you're watching and listening and you're thinking, no, I'm afraid of flying and you should not be flying in a small airplane for whatever reason, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what is that is stopping you so we can have a discussion in the future about it.
So, Gopal, we talk about all of the different ways you can experience an aircraft ride. And if somebody out there is even just thinking about it, maybe they're still a little bit anxious, but if they're thinking about it, what can they expect on their first flight?
Well, it depends on what you're doing. The most common way, as we talked about before, is these scenic flights. And scenic flights are fantastic when you are visiting a place that you're not normally at. And usually there are these operators that offer either airplane tours or helicopter tours or hot air balloon tours. And you go talk to them, and most of them are very safe. Most of them are very well done, very professionally operated. And they will give you all kinds of instruction as to what to expect, what to wear, how to prepare for it. Um, and for most part, honestly, bring yourself, dress comfortably, and have your camera ready because you're going to keep creating memories.
Yep, that's just about it. So, if someone was interested in, let's say, a discovery flight in a glider, I know you've done a lot of those, and if they show up in a t-shirt, shorts, and tennis shoes and their cell phone, is that about all they need?
Yeah, I mean, for most part, we encourage people to dress comfortably, right? Dress shoes and high heels are probably not the right thing to have. Um, Tennis shoes and reasonably warm or cool, whatever, depending on the temperature is. One thing to keep in mind that sometimes these airplane rides can take you up to 4,000, 5,000 feet, where it could be a little chillier up there, even if things are okay at the ground level. And if you're taking uh, hot air balloons and you're there for 2 hours, you could have started when things are warm, but maybe it gets chillier. So maybe you want to bring a sweater. It all depends on where. It all depends on what the weather is, what the day is. But for most part, bring yourself, have fun, and make memories.
Yeah, absolutely. I usually tell people if they do ask in terms of what to wear, dress for the season, knowing that it might be a few degrees cooler where you're going on the airplane ride. You're usually not going too high, but I know on a glider you can go as much as a mile high, and it can be a few degrees cooler up there. And by the way, there isn't heating or air conditioning in most of these, so you're kind of dressing for the climate. I usually tell people definitely not the dress shoes. Definitely pretend like you're going to take a walking tour outdoors in today's weather and maybe dress for that. Try not to show up in flip flops because you're going to be climbing in and out of an aircraft that's going to take a step and a little grab hold and making sure that your sandals or whatever you're wearing don't catch on anything as you're trying to get in. So safety and comfort are really key. So if you just dress for a good walking tour, I'd say you're going to be pretty well prepared. And then just making sure that you've got hat, sunglasses, if that's what makes you feel comfortable. I like to supply extra earplugs because even though the small airplanes we fly in are not very loud, sometimes that's a little bothersome for people. So sometimes a good set of foam earplugs can be an extra tool that you can carry for people's comfort. And that's pretty much about it.
Yeah, good reminder on the earplugs. Although, if you take a glider ride, you don't have to worry about it because there's no engine that's making the noise.
It's very quiet. And when you have people waiting in line at an annual airport open house where there's a flying breakfast and it's summer and it's hot, you're definitely going to know that you'll be a little bit warm in that aircraft as you taxi out, because even though you can keep the windows open or sometimes have a door open to let the air in, at some point you're going to have to close those up right before you take off. And so it might get a little warm in the airplane. And then when you get up in the air, you've got really nice air vents in a lot of these, and the temperature will drop a few degrees as you go up. So just to be aware that it may be a little warm at first on a summer day.
And most of these airplanes have nice windows that you can take plenty of photos.
Yeah. There are great windows on most of these 2 and 4 seat aircraft. A couple things that people may not realize if they haven't been in a small airplane, especially a glider, which has a cool bubble canopy where you can see up and down and all over, is some aircraft are actually built like that. They'll either have canopies, or in a more typical flight training aircraft, those are used for airplane rides. You will have windows all along the sides so that everyone in the front and the back, and sometimes seeing out through windows in the back is possible in some airplanes. So you will almost get a 360-degree view in whatever you're flying in. And it doesn't matter if you take the back seat or the rear seat, you actually have a pretty comfortable seat and pretty good visibility wherever. So if you have a 4-seater and you're able to take as many as 3 people, there's certain weight limitations on the aircraft you have to be cognizant of, but sometimes you can actually take a person in each seat, and kids are great for that because they'll be a little bit lighter as well. And definitely you can almost take a whole family sometimes on board an aircraft.
Yeah, if you're in a hot air balloon, you will get a 360 because you're in open air there.
Open air. Definitely. And there are such thing as open cockpit biplane rides. There are historic tours some companies give where they will have an antique biplane that's been restored. It looks like brand new, straight out of the era it came from, like the 30s and 40s. And you can actually be out in the open air. And that's another thing to be aware of, is that if you're going to have an open cockpit, a hot air balloon, you're going to get a little colder as you go, and everything else will generally be with a closed window or a closed door. So depending on the type of ride you're taking, you can make it work for you depending on the weather that day.
Yeah, I know. I have personally taken a couple of these scenic tours. We were in New Zealand, I don't know, like 15 years ago. We took a scenic tour up in the hills in southern island of New Zealand, and they tell you how to dress because
Hmm.
I had never been in New Zealand before, so they will tell you what the weather is. Of course, New Zealand weather is opposite of what is here in North America. So when it's summer here, it's winter, and so sometimes you don't think about it. But they usually tell you exactly what to wear, how to be comfortable, and all those things. Um, and hot air balloons, that's another thing that I haven't done. But my mom, who is in her mid 80s, called me up, and she's going to be visiting us next week, and she said this one thing she wants to do is get on a hot air balloon. And guess what? I have planned for
Wow.
her.
Oh, wow. Is that something that'll be new for you too? Are you going along? Are you able to take some others?
I have not been in a hot air
Me
balloon.
neither. Neither.
Yeah, I've heard only the best things about it. It's kind of interesting experience, so I'm looking forward to it. Again, the freedom of flight. I mean, you're up there in a basket, I guess.
But with a certified hot air balloon pilot who has a pilot's license, just like with powered airplane pilots or glider pilots, and so you'll be in good hands. That's something that's on my list. I've never been on a hot air balloon before, so that sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, after I do this, I'll come and tell you how it is.
Oh, definitely. I'd love to hear about it. And I understand that they like to go fairly early in the morning when the air is smooth and the winds are not as strong. And so, for anyone taking an airplane ride or a glider ride, sometimes you can check on that for going either earlier in the day when it's smooth, or not going when it's too windy. So there's lots of ways to make it work.
Best recommendation is to listen to that particular operator. They will tell you what the right time is. I mean, they know the local geography and the climate better than anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And outside of fly-in breakfasts, there are also great events for kids. The Experimental Aircraft Association, a large aviation organization nationwide, has a national program called Young Eagles for Kids and Eagles for Adults, where you can sign up at an event or individually and get that first airplane ride. I volunteer as a pilot for Young Eagles, and it's amazing when you can spend a day just taking kids up in your airplane as a volunteer. It's basically the 15-minute city tour around an airport, come back down, load up some more kids, and go back up again. That's one of the truly rewarding experiences, not just for the parents who absolutely love seeing their kids coming back smiling and going up for the very first ride. And then they get pictures at the end. And that's another way of having that first airplane ride as an amazing experience. Definitely think about it for kids. And if you're interested in being a little more flexible for the timing, a gift certificate from a local flight school is a great way to just say, hey, I'd like to do this on a birthday or on a holiday or some other day that is special to you and fits your schedule. So there are so many ways of making this happen, right? I don't see any excuses at this point.
You mentioned fly-in breakfast a couple of times. Can you expand a little bit on it? Where do they find that, where they are happening, and how do they sign up?
Sure. Anything that you want to do for an aircraft ride, a hot air balloon ride is obviously searchable online. If you would like to look for fly in breakfast in my state, you can get a list of cities, states, and airports where they will have upcoming events. Generally, a fly in breakfast is called that because they invite pilots to fly in their own airplanes. And then either if the weather isn't good or for the rest of the people in that area, you can certainly drive in to that fly in breakfast, have a basic pancake breakfast is usually the tradition in the Midwest. There's all kinds of variations on that, like hamburger lunches, barbecue lunches, chili feeds, where you can come in, pay a small fee, and get in line to be served food in a tent, and you can walk around and look at airplanes that have parked for the day. And a lot of times, those places are offering airplane rides, usually provided by a local flight school, because they'll have those typical four-seat aircraft that they can do that, where you can sign up for a ride at a fly-in, just walk in and do it.
That's interesting. I think most people hear the word fly in, they assume that you have to have an airplane, you have to be a pilot to get in there. So what you're telling us is that you could be a non-pilot and you can show up, and at best, at worst, you get to see the airplanes. At best, you might even get an airplane ride out of it.
Organizers of flying breakfasts are amazing at marketing to the local area. So in the end, you actually get more people driving in their cars to go to the breakfast and see the airplanes than they have pilots flying in, because it's definitely a local draw. Think of it like your local county fair or something like that, where you'll have a day of cars streaming in and parking and taking a look around and having a lot of fun. A fly-in breakfast is very, very much the same thing. The public is welcome to go in fact, you'll see flyers and signs all around town advertising that, and they're generally marketed as a fly-in slash drive-in, because again, if it's raining or the weather's bad that day and you can't fly your airplane in, you're still welcome to drive yourself in.
I have a question for our audience, and if you are actually intrigued by this and want to find out more about aviation, what would you like to do? Are you thinking of career? Are you thinking of doing it for fun? Are you thinking of scenic rides? Let us know, and we will give you some links in our description as to how to find the EAA, or maybe some other interesting areas where you can go find out more about fun flights and fun flight experience in your area.
Gopal, you're an experienced pilot and instructor, and you've given a lot of discovery flights in both gliders and airplanes. So, have any of your passengers ever expressed an interest in taking that a step further after that first ride?
I would say that that's the most gratifying part of being a pilot and an instructor. I mean, yes, I enjoy teaching somebody who's already an experienced pilot, but when somebody comes in and this is their first ever ride, and like you said, they have that big giant smile on their face, and the immediate question, if they're young, they go to their parents and say, "Hey, can I do this again? When can I do this again?" That is by far the most gratifying thing as an instructor and a pilot. Don't you agree?
I agree. I think whether it's a ride or first lesson, which we'll talk about, and somebody will come back with such a positive experience and want to do more, I would say that that is definitely the most rewarding. We talked about programs like Young Eagles, which I love, and I can't tell you how much I get out of that with flying a small airplane with somebody who's newly exposed to aviation, and they're craving more. And to me, that is just helping foster this industry, helping foster the fun of flight. and taking it a step further is always welcome.
Yeah, so you mentioned, yeah, Experimental Aircraft Association Young Eagles program, but the EAA also has a air camp that we participate in here in Wisconsin, and they bring in these high school students, and in a single day or over a weekend, the high school students get a small airplane ride, a helicopter ride, and a glider ride.
How
And I
cool
mean,
is
they're
that?
not very long, maybe 20-minute rides, something like
Hmm.
that. And they get to experience three kinds of aviation in basically a weekend. And that gives them and their parents a very, very good idea of, is this what I want to do? Because some people get in and say, no, that's not exactly what I want to do. I like it, but that's not what I want to do. Some people like, oh, I want to do more.
And nobody's ever not glad that they did it. So even if it's something where they say, "Hey, that was awesome. I love the experience, but I probably won't go the flying route." That's okay because you just had this amazing time.
Yeah, exactly. And then you talked about people who come in with fear of heights or fear of flying. And as experienced pilots and instructors, we know how to put them at ease, right? So you kind of preemptively take that out of them. And then even if they're clutching a little bit at the end, that experience is so rewarding. So I've had numerous cases of flying with people who at least come back for another ride. Maybe they come back next year and say, hey, I want to do this. Last time I did the glider flight. This time I want to do this. Or last time I saw this place. Can we go see this place? And that is very rewarding for us.
Absolutely. Even if it is something where going a step further than the ride is not something you're going to do, that doesn't matter. The airports that I talked about that have the fly ins do this every year, once a year. And there are people who love to go visit that local airport every year and get an airplane ride and get their kids an airplane ride because that's just something that you can make into a tradition, and that's definitely one way of enjoying it.
Yeah, and I never met a pilot who is not passionate about sharing our own experience. So when you meet these people, you learn a lot from them, and they'll be happy to tell you. I think we talked about this in a previous episode about pilots influencing other non-pilots.
Definitely, a lot of people got their start in aviation that way. Like I mentioned, it was that first ride that got me started, and so you never know when somebody might have that little nugget of interest to take that a step further. So if somebody says that they are now interested in maybe learning a little bit more beyond that helicopter ride, glider, or airplane ride, what can they do next?
So that's where we call as a introductory flight lesson. So we distinguish that from a discovery ride, which is for most part it's a fun ride. But you can take this thing called a intro flight ride, and where, believe it or not, they actually put you in the pilot seat. And of course, the instructor has dual controls, so they can control everything. So it's always safe. And they give you controls. They kind of get your feet wet and get you excited about flying and flying that particular machine that you're in.
So these are called introductory flights more commonly, and you're saying that the can an adult or a child do this? What are the parameters there?
Well, you could be a child and do this, but because there are age limits as to when you can become a pilot, it makes much more sense when you are at least in the upper teenage to come and do this and then figure out, is this something I want to do as maybe even a profession?
Sure. So whether you want to get your private pilot certificate, which is your basic pilot's license that let you fly around recreationally or personally, I believe that if you're in that mid-teen years, at 15 to 17, because 17 is the age of eligibility for that, that's a good time to start. And not only that, you can reach the controls and the rudder pedals in a typical airplane. So you generally have to be maybe a little bit on that older side or teenage side of it to turn that into an effective introductory flight. But then you do get to sit in the left seat, which is typically the pilot seat, and the instructor is next to you and has all the same flight controls that you do to, like you said, keep this safe and keep this as part of a lesson then.
Yeah, I think, let's face it, aviation is not a cheap activity. I mean, it's expensive, it's time consuming, it takes a lot of effort, and therefore, it's a good idea for you to go try it before you commit to it because it is a commitment.
Yeah, and that's where the introductory flight can be great because for not much more than that first airplane ride, you can take a 30 or 60-minute introductory lesson that is treated like your very first flight lesson. So you'll start out learning a few more things about the airplane and how the flight controls work, and your instructor will guide you up through taxiing out to the runway and taking off. And what's really cool about this that people who love the most when they do this the first time is they come back and they say, I got to take off in the airplane with my instructor showing me how. And I got to push in the throttle to move that propeller and hold on to the controls to fly that airplane off the ground. And they did help me land it, but I actually got to touch the controls the whole time. And that is definitely taking that thrill, that rewarding experience to that next step for people who actually want to learn to fly the airplane. And it's amazing how easy it is the first time when your instructor shows you how to do it and they're talking you through the whole time.
Yeah, and their smile puts smiles on our face. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you don't have to be a young child or a teenager to try this. I have done discovery flights or introductory flights for older adults, people who are in the 50s and 60s. There is no such thing as I'm too old to try it. And that is another fascinating part of the world of aviation.
It can be done at any age. So whether it's a ride or an introductory lesson, because maybe somebody has always wanted to just take a flight lesson and experience that, even just once, it can be done at any age. I think I recall taking people in their 90s up for the very first small airplane ride. And that is just as rewarding as taking young kids up because they absolutely love it and they'll never forget it. And that's just one of the rewards of being able to do this with people.
Yeah, a few years ago, we gave a glider ride to a woman who I think it was her 85th birthday or something like that. And oh my goodness, she was such a sport. She was such a sport. She didn't have any problem getting in or getting out. And she had this big giant smile. She enjoyed it. And when the people like that enjoy, you go home with that kind of satisfaction. It brings a little bit meaning to what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about people who are a little bit anxious about getting that kind of experience. It's definitely something that just opens your eyes to what you can do with something like that. People never come back with a bad experience. And to have somebody who's a little bit fearful of flying in a small airplane and they go and they come back and talk about how great it was, that is also very, very rewarding to have dispelled that myth and improve that anxiety and sometimes cured their fear of flying, which is absolutely amazing because then they can do it again and continue to enjoy that experience and hopefully share that with others.
So we are in the whole mission of spreading the joy of aviation. We really hope we convinced you to take a look at taking your first discovery flight in an airplane or a helicopter or a hot air balloon. Hope we did. So if you are and if you're intrigued, go to the comments and let us know because again, we nothing makes us more happy than hearing about how we can spread the joy of aviation much more widely.
We had a lot of fun in today's discussion on how to share the joy of flight with others. If you like this episode and want to see more, please support us by subscribing and send us your comments. We welcome your ideas for future episodes and keep those coming.